Let's get this set up. We got... Okay, so... Alright, I'm just setting everything up right now, so please bear with me. I got people upstairs preparing dinner, so I might get called away when they know I'm recording. Such as living with a boomer and a zoomer. Yeah. I'm Gen X, so I'm caught in between those generations. So, yeah. Alright, so I'm about to start streaming and getting everything ready. But I'm going to go ahead and, before I get into my main topic, I'm going to do a follow-up on a news item that I did about a week ago, give or take, because there's some new information that came up, and I want to get to that. So, yeah, I've got monetization. Yeah, finally. It only took, 3-4 tries before I was able to get approved, but now I am. And I'm doing this nice little recording that's going to happen so that you get a little bit of extra for when I go ahead and start editing this together, because when I do the live stream, you're getting only what I broadcast. And as a Patreon supporter, you're going to get stuff that you wouldn't get with the live broadcast, like this a little bit before. So, got one more minute left to start. And so that's pretty much it. So, alright, we are live, or at least trying to be. As I'm going to go ahead and give a link in Super Chat just to test out, see if it's working. Oh, yep, there it is. Yeah, link to my GoFundMe. Yeah, I've got the chat right up here in the corner. Or right up here in the corner. You can see my finger. Alright, so, yeah, and I decided to do a little transparent background because the whole chat window was just blocking everything out, and I just don't like that, and it tends to overwrite everything that I'm trying to do with getting everything to fit within the frame. So, yeah, I'm just doing the whole thing with the live chat and everything. So, I'm going to go ahead and start by giving a shout out to everyone who donated to my GoFundMe campaign. So let me go ahead and call that up real quick, because there are some people. So Caitlin Regan, who donated $15, Elaine Nerd Cookies donated $20, Anonymous donated $20, and Final Death Star also donated $20. So yeah, thank you very much for making that happen. I am actually trying to get myself a laptop, MSI Creator 17, which is actually pretty awesome, but it's also going to cost me some pretty big bank. I've got, hopefully, one that is not already sold out, but by tomorrow I should have enough to send away for a custom model that meets all my needs. And then, of course, I'll just have to build my savings back up, because it's taken quite a while for me to do that, because other things have come up and other expenses as well. So we'll see what happens. Because I'm actually trying to get a hold of a legal copy of Adobe CS6 Master Collection. I actually ordered one from an independent seller who's turned it into the post office, but it hasn't been mailed out, and he wants another $100 to go ahead and send it out, which I would love to be able to do, because I'm tired of waiting. I went ahead and sent away for it about May 1st, give or take, and the label's been created. It's not in the system. Who knows when or if that thing will ever be processed, but it's 2-hour drive for the seller to go ahead and get to the post office and then take it to FedEx and stuff. So and it'll cost another $100 to go ahead and get it sooner. So I got to make a choice. Do I get the laptop now and have to get the Adobe programs sent to me in a couple weeks? Because who knows when or if that post office will be open. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, so let me go ahead and get to the first news item of the day. But let me go ahead and start off the music. It's the Wilk Report. I'm Michael Wilk, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. Got a live stream going. Hopefully the Wi-Fi doesn't keep cutting out on me. I'm also recording, so if you want the whole Patreon video, that is going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to continue recording after I stop live streaming, and so I'll have the whole video up for Patreon subscribers, and you'll have a password to view the whole thing if you want. But right now I want to go ahead and start us off with a news item, follow-up to my video about late Japanese wrestler Hana Kimura, or Kimura Hana, however you want to say her name. With Japanese, they put the last name first. But yeah, she committed suicide a little while ago. Let me call up the browser here. And this is from May 25th from Kyoto News. Japanese Netflix star Hana Kimura likely took her own life using toxic gas. Tokyo, Hana Kimura, the 22-year-old female professional wrestler who was among the cast of the internationally popular Netflix reality show Terrace House, is believed to have killed herself using toxic gas at her Tokyo home where she was living alone, investigative sources said on Monday. Kimura, who had been a target of cyberbullying, was found collapsed on her bed with a plastic bag covering her head early Saturday. The container seemingly used to generate toxic gas was discovered nearby, the sources said, adding several suicide notes were also found in her room. In Kimura's apartment, a piece of paper was attached to a door that said toxic gas being generated in Japanese. One of the notes was addressed to her mother, saying, "Thank you for giving birth to me," according to the sources. Her death was confirmed at a hospital. News of her death has sparked an outpouring of messages of condolence and a public outcry against cyberbullying, including a tweet by singer Kiari Pamu saying, "People say we should just ignore slanderous comments, but it's difficult. An entertainer is also a human being. Please don't forget this." And it is true, actually. People forget that celebrities and entertainers are, at the end of the day, human beings. They do have a right to their opinions, and their status as celebrities gives them a platform to voice those opinions in ways that we don't get to. So, a lot of people, like Howard Stern, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of boomers, and even people in my own generation, Generation X, for some reason, they don't like when celebrities spout their political views, but honestly, they're spouting their political views as well. It's just that they are doing it in a way that, and I'm trying not to come off sounding harsher than I mean to, because I'm not trying to generate any ill will toward my fellow YouTubers, but without naming names, I do feel that there are some people who spend an inordinate amount of time complaining about politics being inserted into television. But the fact of the matter is, politics has always been present in television. It's been in stuff that you ordinarily wouldn't even think, like, especially from the 1960s onward. I mean, not so much in the 50s, because, there was an aversion to rattling cages. You had Eisenhower in office, you had the Korean War in the early 50s, and then in the later 50s, you had things that were building up in real life, but on television you wouldn't necessarily know it, because a lot of shows, were kind of self-censoring, or when they did engage in putting out political views, it was done in a way that was so subtle you almost didn't realize it. But then you get to the 60s, and then it becomes much more out there, and especially opposition to the Vietnam War it provided the opportunity for a lot of showrunners like Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry, for example, to put forth their own views. And if you think about it, two of the most well-loved and well-respected showrunners from the 1960s, Gene Roddenberry and Rod Serling, very often put out their political views. And yes, you were meant to take a side. To the extent that they did promote both sides of an issue, specifically Gene Roddenberry on Star Trek, it was never to get you to be neutral or to what's the word I'm looking for? It was never to get you to look at both sides in such a way that you engage in moral relativism. That is where, you kind of refuse to take any kind of side. No, you were never meant to be neutral. To the extent that you were given both sides of an argument, you were meant to condemn the side of the argument that was being attacked. So, yeah, don't think for a moment that leftist politics were never an issue in the 1960s or 70s. I mean, they were very much present, and some of our best television shows, like All in the Family, heavily leaned into leftist politics. But it was done in such a way that your intelligence was respected. And the complaints that I get from a lot of my fellow YouTubers about politics being inserted, they're complaining about leftist politics being inserted. But the problem is, it's not even really leftist politics. It's identity politics, which is often employed by the far right of the Democrats and that section of the establishment to divide people who would otherwise have common ground under, like, say, economic issues, like, say, fair wages, fair working conditions, because, during this whole pandemic, people at Amazon and FedEx and UPS and our postal system have been putting their lives on the line because they're just as vulnerable to infection from COVID-19 as any of us. And we've had well over 100,000 people die since at least March because of this thing. So, when someone goes ahead and lies to you and promotes conspiracy fantasies about COVID-19 being a hoax or that it's overblown, no, it's not. It's neither. But let me go ahead and get back to the article here on Kimura. So, on Monday, and this again was late last month, leading politicians reaffirmed the need to deal with such bullying following the death of Kimura, who is known to be a popular wrestler, usually playing the role of a heel or villain. And I kind of remember the reaction to Lita on WWC back in the early 2000s, because there was a scandal involving Adam Copeland, who played the wrestler Edge on WWE, Matt Hardy, and Lita, who was Matt Hardy's girlfriend at the time, and Edge was married at that time. And it transpired that Edge and Lita were having an affair. It became publicly known, and it was actually kind of worked into the stories on WWE. And the fans, for some reason, kept piling on Lita as though she was like this big betrayer and, just relentlessly hounded her and attacked her. And I think that kind of contributed to, a lot of her issues as well going forward, because it really hurt her career. But, obviously it didn't really prevent any of the three from working together and taking those issues and working them into the stories on WWE, because they still had to work together as colleagues, and that might not be as dramatic in real life as it was on the screen. But a lot of people, and I remember watching on TV and reading in the news where, Lita did suffer a lot for her career because of this. And that's just, from going from being a face to a heel. So, but let me go ahead and get back to the article here. So the Diet affairs chief of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, which is actually pretty far right. So it's, notice how right wingers usurp the term liberal and use the language of liberalism to push far-right policies. But I'll be doing this on my other channel because I'm developing a channel that's strictly devoted to politics. But it's neither here nor there right now. But all right, so yeah, Hiroshi Moriyama met with Jun Azumi, his counterpart in the main opposition Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan. They agreed to start a discussion on establishing a set of rules to prevent cyberbullying. It's important for the legislature to play a role to make a society where such incidents do not happen, said Moriyama. We will aim to reach a consensus about a certain direction for the rules by the fall. Kimura was among the six cast members of Terrace House Tokyo from 2019 to 2020, the latest in a series that began in 2012 and is broadcast by Fuji Television. It's also garnered a cult following overseas, as it's distributed by the United States video streaming service Netflix with English subtitles. And yeah, here's a picture of Miss Kimura in her wrestling regalia in the ring. The current series, which began in May 2019, features 3 women and 3 men sharing a house in Tokyo. The cast members are looking for love while living under the same roof, and there's no script in the show, according to Netflix. However, Kimura, who joined the show last September, had been the target of hateful messages on social media, criticizing her remarks and behavior during the reality program, especially after an episode distributed in late March in which she lost her temper. After one of the male cast members shrank one of her expensive wrestling costumes after accidentally mixing it with his clothes and washing it in a washing machine, Kimura was seen yelling at him, "Be more considerate to others," before pulling a cap off his head in an angry outburst. So yeah, I guess, yeah, this is part of what people were responding to, and yeah, I mean, come on, people. What the hell is wrong with you? It's like you act as though celebrities aren't allowed to convey emotion on television or on the big screen or in real life. I mean, like I said, celebrities are human beings as well, often very flawed human beings. Some of them are deeply conservative, some of them are flaming lefties. Alyssa Milano, for example, is deeply conservative, but pretends to be a liberal on TV. Yeah, because, notice what happened when Joe Biden was revealed as a sexual predator. And it's been known for years that he is, but, she quickly ditched her Me Too movement support to support Biden, even knowing that he's a serial rapist, even knowing that he's a known child molester, which, I pointed this out in a previous video of mine regarding a film called The Trouble with Being Born. There's very graphic on-video evidence of Joe Biden inappropriately touching women and young girls. And, so this information is out there. And, of course, a lot of fake left Hollywood. And I must emphasize this as much as I can, as often as I can. Fake left Hollywood, the part of Hollywood that pretends to be liberal, pretends to be left. Because much like the Democrat half of the one-party system, it benefits from far-right policies. And so, you get people like Alyssa Milano who are attached to very powerful people within Hollywood who typically lean towards members of the establishment who support their interests. And those interests are often on the far right of the political spectrum. But for various reasons, they find it more expedient to pretend to be liberal and throw bones to the left, like, say, identity politics, which, again, it's used to divide people on the left who would otherwise have common causes to fight together. So there's this fake left, you got the real left, and then, of course, you've got the far right, which has always been pretty out there, but it's only gotten worse only over the last 30 or so years. And, so you've got people who pretend to be left, and they're putting on a show. But in shows like Terrace House, where there are no scripts, and you're basically just video recording people going about their day-to-day activities, when you've got 6 people in a house, and they're trying to live together. I mean, you ask anyone who's lived with anyone for any length of time, yeah, people are going to get on each other's nerves. They're going to go off. They're going to lose their tempers. They're going to say things they don't necessarily mean, things that they're going to regret later. And I remember there was actually an American reality show that put former celebrities in a MTV House situation, and those included Werner Troyer, Joni Laurer, or wrestler China. You also had Brigitte Nielsen, and several others, and they all just kept getting on each other's nerves because China or someone, I think, accidentally called Troyer a midget, and he got very offended by it and said, "Look, I'm a dwarf, not a midget, and there's like reasons why we call ourselves this and not the other word." So, there was like just various bad blood being stirred up, and I think part of it, was probably exaggerated for the camera just because they knew the cameras were rolling and you're trying to get ratings. So, yeah, you might end up acting out, more forcefully in a way or hyping up your emotions in a way that you otherwise wouldn't because the cameras are there. Or maybe some people were going the opposite approach and self-censoring because the cameras were there and they were trying to keep a head on their shoulders and not, say things that they really would have regretted. But that's the kind of show that people apparently like to watch. I don't. I never saw the point in it. But there are shows like that, that people like to watch. And when you get people living in an environment and getting on each other's nerves, yeah, naturally, when someone does something stupid and boneheaded that affects you, on a level that you really shouldn't have to be affected. Because, people don't seem to realize that professional wrestling doesn't always pay the big bucks, especially not when you're so young. I mean, as you get older and more established and you draw in the crowds more and more, then your salary goes up and you can negotiate with your agent for, a higher and higher salary. And then there's like licensing deals and advertising and, movie roles, all that comes later. Kimura was at the start of her career, so she probably wasn't making all that much money. And so, her wrestling costume probably, was a lot more expensive than she could afford to replace easily. It might cost her more than, was allotted in her monthly budget. So, that thing gets ruined, you're pretty much shit out of luck. So, yeah, I can understand why she would lose her temper and go off. So if people go ahead and lose, they yell back and they're inconsiderate and they're, and I can relate because, I've had instances where my own clothes were ruined because of, someone else in the house decided, oh, I'm just going to throw it all in and wash it all in cold water, even though my items are warm water only, and they end up shrinking and I can't wear it anymore because then it ends up being too small for me. Okay, I take a big and tall size shirt, extra large, and if you don't wash it properly, it shrinks down, and then I can't wear it anymore. It's too tight on me. So yeah, I've had that happen, so I can kind of understand why someone would get annoyed over that. So let's go ahead and return here. So yeah, so that's the kind of thing that she got attacked over. So after this episode, I guess she started getting tweets, including some saying everybody will be happy if you're gone quickly, never appear on TV again. On the day of her death, the Yokohama native tweeted, "Every day I receive nearly 100 honest opinions, and I cannot deny that I get hurt." She also wrote on Twitter, "Thank you for giving birth to me, Mom. I want it to be loved in life." So, yeah, this is, very sad. And then, of course, CNN, bloody freaking pop-up ads. Yeah. And it's a live stream, too, so I can't really edit that out, but I'll edit that out for the recording, probably. Who knows? Or maybe I'll just leave it intact. But, yeah. This is kind of related to the other article. It's from May 26th, and it has to do with Japanese legislators. Yeah, they're discussing cyberbullying laws after the death of Ms. Kimura. So, yeah, this is all very, very tragic. I don't know why someone would go ahead and do this to someone where just because you don't like that person, you want to hound that person online to the point where that person doesn't want to live anymore. I mean, come on, people. It's a fucking TV show. Or it's a fucking movie, okay? If you don't like someone saying what's on his or her mind, if you don't want to hear that person's opinions, nobody's forcing you to listen to it. All right? I mean, sure, yeah, you can go ahead and respond when someone attacks you. That's perfectly understandable. And I say, if someone attacks you, then by all means defend yourself. Like, for example, I mentioned Alyssa Milano before, who's constantly attacking people on Twitter and other forms of social media who call her out for her hypocrisy. People like Rose McGowan, people like, myself, who are third-party voters, and she's saying, oh, if you don't vote for Biden, you're voting for Trump. Well, no, I'm not. I'm not voting for Biden or for Trump, okay? I am an independent voter. I almost said candidate. No, I've considered being a candidate for local office, but no, it's not going to happen. But no, I am an independent voter. I vote third-party in elections most of the time, and I just do not tie myself to Republicans or Democrats. They're both far right, quite fascistic, and the people who've been deploying police departments and National Guard to crush the protests that are going on across the country right now, they're Democrats. The mayor of Cleveland, where I am, deploying the pigs to go ahead and crush the protests, he's a Democrat. So, yeah, obviously I'm not going to vote for him if he's putting out policies that I feel are destructive to the community. And if he's letting the cops basically dictate what gets done in response to peaceful protests. Because people didn't actually start rioting until they were fired upon by cops. That's just the truth. I mean, you can believe the lies that get tweeted out on social media by that orange idiot. You can believe the lies that get put out on corporate media like CNN or MSNBC or Fox Noise. But the fact of the matter is, because I know people who were down there and saw what happened, the cops initiated the violence. They always do. Or people they plant within the crowds. And some outside agitators like neo-Nazis apparently. People who were down there reported that there were some black-clad people who are actually identified as belonging to neo-Nazi groups, breaking the windows of the police station downtown in order to stir up the cops to fire upon the crowd, which is mostly black and Hispanic. And, things are happening that way. So, there's a lot of stuff that you don't get told. And, just keep in mind that, I'm an independent, and I vote against policies, not candidates or even necessarily political parties. I don't vote for candidates or political parties. I vote for policies, and that's it. So for people like Milano to attack me and blame me for putting Trump in office when her party put up probably the worst candidate possible to run against that orange idiot, Hillary Clinton, who is so corrupt and far right that she lost an election to an orange traffic cone with a dead fox glued to the top. But no, let's all blame Russia. Let's all blame third parties. Let's all blame, whatever. So, when I go ahead and respond to people like Alyssa Milano or Deborah Messing, that's in self-defense because they're attacking me directly because of my choice not to vote for their candidates, who are just as bad as the candidates for the other parties. And in fact, Jesse Ventura, I don't know what your thoughts are on him, but, when he was running for governor of Minnesota, he accurately described the two political parties as being like professional wrestlers. They pretend to hate each other on TV, but when the cameras are off, they're all hanging out at the same restaurants, the same bars, hobnobbing with the same donors. So they're all, and of course, for all people call Nancy Pelosi some kind of socialist, but she's going ahead and labeling Black Lives Matter and Antifa as thugs or terrorists. Obama called Black Lives Matter a bunch of thugs, deployed the National Guard. People forget that, but my tribe, right or wrong, you can't talk to people who are closed-minded like that. So, but so those are instances where I feel it's justified to respond to someone on Twitter and call that person out. But that's a whole different kettle of fish to going after a celebrity for simply voicing an opinion or behaving in a manner on a TV show that you don't like, and then relentlessly hounding that person to the point where she commits suicide. That's cyberbullying. There are people who engage in doxing, that is, revealing a person's personal information, like full name, address, phone numbers, places of employment, where you can go ahead and harass people at their jobs. And sometimes that is justified. Like, for example, the Ku Klux Klan members, the white supremacists, the Nazis who were terrorizing governments during the lockdown, and prior to that, when Trump was first elected, that they show up with torches and guns, and they're in your face, and nobody touches them. Nobody bothers to criticize them, except maybe on the TV to pretend to be outraged, but they're allowed to do whatever they want with impunity. And then you go ahead and crack down on people who are not armed and who are trying to protest peacefully and say, hey, can you please stop killing us? That's the ones we're attacking as being unreasonable, or as being terrorists, or as being thugs and rioters and looters. That's the people we decry. But yeah, so I spent about a half hour now putting off my political opinions, and I'm trying to do this as Batwoman story. So now we're going to get to the meat of the issue here. So I hope you've if you've stuck around watching, feel free to use the chat here in the side panel. Weigh in with your opinions. I've got super chats now, so I will respond to comments that are put through on super chat. I can't respond to every comment because there would just be too many on a night where you've got like maybe 100 or 200 or 6,000 people. Not that I'm there yet, but sometime soon I could be. And so if you do a super chat or whatever, I'll respond to comments. And like I said, right here, you can see where the comment is. But let me go ahead and get to the first story, because we've got a new character being created for Batwoman and Ruby Rose. Because what's going on, and you already know this if you've been paying attention, is that Ruby Rose announced her departure from Batwoman on May 19th. I believe was the last episode of the first season. The show has been plagued by a lot of troubles. It's not just that it's badly written. It's not just that it's poorly produced, because the lighting is crap. The visual effects are garbage. The acting is stiff and wooden, except from the woman playing Alice. I forget her name, and then Doug Ray Scott. Those are the only two who actually seem to do any emoting on that show. But she announced her departure like 2 days after the final episode of the first season aired, and there was a lot of speculation as to whether she quit or was fired. So that we ended up seeing on other channels like Midnight's Edge and Erotic and Mecha Random and Critical Drinker, and all the other YouTube channels, they were speculating as to whether or not it was her quitting or her being fired, or whether or not it was a mutual split. I'm guessing probably a mutual split based on some of the stuff I've been reading. But let me go ahead and read this to you. The CW series is opting not to recast the role of Kane that Ruby Rose played in Season 1. Whoever ends up under the cowl in Season 2 of Batwoman, she won't be playing Kane. And why do the writers on these sites insist on using the word they to describe one person? It's a she, okay? It is a she. And you can call me transphobic if you want. You're full of shit. You know you're full of shit. Pardon my French, but yeah, you're full of shit if you call me transphobic, okay? Because I'm not complaining about transgender people. I'm complaining about the misuse of grammar to try and deny an individual his or her identity, okay? There are gender-neutral singular pronouns that, you know, transgender people actually have come up with to get around the whole problem of using plural personal pronouns as for a single antecedent. You know, and you know, I'm trying to respect them by using those pronouns for people who are gender neutral. But if you know the gender of the person being discussed, you don't need to use a gender neutral pronoun. You can use the pronoun that is appropriate to that person. If it's a she, you use she. If it's a he, you use he. Okay? Fuck. Grow up, people. Act like adults. You want to be treated like adults? Act like adults. You know, quit yelling at people like me who complain that you're too lazy and stupid to reword your sentences. I'm over that shit, okay? If you want to unfollow me for that, be my guest. I don't give a shit, but you know, that's my opinion. If you like my opinion, fine. If you don't, I don't care, all right? I'm not going to lose sleep over, pissing off certain people who just don't deserve that kind of respect because they give no respect, all right? Respect is something you earn from me. If you don't earn it, you don't get it. So let's go ahead and go back to the article. So whoever ends up under the cowl in Season 2 of Batwoman, she won't be playing Kane, following the surprise, well, not really a surprise, departure of Ruby Rose from the title role at the end of the CW superhero drama's first season. The show has opted to create a new character to play Batwoman, rather than recast Rose's role of Kane, a cousin of Bruce Wayne, The Hollywood Reporter has confirmed. Word of the change came via a since-deleted casting notice posted to a Batwoman Reddit forum. Per Decider, which first reported the news, the new character is named Ryan Wilder. Whether that's a placeholder name is unclear, and is described as a woman in her mid-20s, which means she'll be played by someone in her mid to late 30s, who is about to become Batwoman. She's likable, messy, a little goofy, and untamed. She's also nothing like Kane, the woman who wore the bat suit before her, the notice reads, according to The Decider. With no one in her life to keep her on track, Ryan spent years as a drug runner, dodging the Gotham City Police Department and masking her pain with bad habits. A girl who would steal milk from an alley cat, for an alley cat, to feed it, could also kill you with her bare hands. Ryan is the most dangerous type of fighter, highly skilled and wildly undisciplined, an out lesbian, athletic, raw, passionate, fallible, and very much not your stereotypical all-American hero. And, that's... that's fine. I think we need to take an evaluation of that statement, going out of the way to call the character likable, which Ruby Rose's Kane was not. All right. I went to film school. I took screenwriting. I've read, books on the craft, from Sitfield to Blake Snyder to the Screenwriter's Bible. All the screenwriters who have worked in Hollywood up to, I would say, about the past 5 to 10 years, maybe 15, they'll tell you the biggest thing that prevents a movie from succeeding is, do you have a likable protagonist? Do you identify with the character being portrayed on screen. Okay, now yeah, you're gonna have your anti-hero movies that Clint Eastwood, for example, is famous for playing. Uh, for example, the so-called Man with No Name trilogy. Well, he had a name; it was Joe, but it's called the Man with No Name trilogy, so we're going to go with it. That's an anti-hero where you are meant to dislike him, but not as much as the other people. You're only rooting for him because he's not as bad. Okay, another example is in Unforgiven, where Eastwood goes ahead and plays, pretty much. How do I put it? For the past 35, 40 years or so, Clint Eastwood has actually spent his career deconstructing the persona he put forth with Dirty Harry, Dirty Harry and his Man with No Name trilogy characters, also like Outlaw Josey Wales and others, where he's playing this character who's very unlikable, and so there's movies like Unforgiven. There's a scene where he's climbing back on the saddle. He's got kids. He's old, but he married late in life and found a measure of redemption and peace in his life. So William Money, the character he plays in Unforgiven, has a scene where he's trying to get back on the saddle after not riding for a number of years, and it's pretty clear that he's no longer the young gunfighter that he was, and so it kind of makes him almost look a bit comical, almost, and it actually walks a very fine line. But there's a reason for that. It is to get the audience to kind of laugh at him a little bit, but also kind of sympathize with him. It's like he's no longer used to this. He's changed over the years. He had something in his life that he got tired of the killing, and tried to go straight. And it's only when he's hired and needs some money that he goes ahead and takes a job to avenge the rape of this prostitute in another town, and then it gets Morgan Freeman, and all this stuff in the movie happens after that. But that one scene where he's trying to explain to his kids why he's leaving, and showing that he is mortal, he is fallible, and it kind of humanizes him a bit, and so you like him. You can't help but root for him because you can kind of identify with him. There's also another movie Eastwood did that again took someone who was otherwise a very unlikable person and turns him into someone who's more sympathetic and challenges him in a way that you are meant to understand that, this is not someone who you would otherwise be friends with, but you can kind of understand him at least. And that is Gran Torino, where, he plays a Korean War veteran, and, he's incredibly racist against Asians, especially Koreans, because he fought in the Korean War and has all that trauma from having been a soldier. But his family is a bunch of money grubbing assholes. They're all basically vultures waiting for him to die so they can get his property, his whatever money he has, his car, his Gran Torino sports vehicle. But that alienation from his own family, because he can't stand them. All right, he knows they're waiting for him to kick off so they can get his stuff, and he's delaying dying because he just doesn't want them to get his belongings. Because he has no more attachment to them. They're assholes. They're scum. But he ends up forming this bond with an Asian kid who, later on in the movies, and his character is dying and only has like maybe a few more months left to live. But he ends up bonding with this Asian kid who's, on the run from a street gang for reasons that are made clear in the movie. And, I highly suggest you go watch that. But, there's this scene in the film where Eastwood goes ahead and He's coughing up blood in the sink at this family gathering where his young neighbor invited him to. And, it's kind of awkward, because here, someone who's, very racist, but, he's, been taken on as kind of like this mentor or savior figure for this young man, because, hey, you save someone's life, he's going to think the world of you. I mean, especially if he's that young and impressionable. But he's trying to draw this guy out of his shell and out of hiding in his house because he just is some curmudgeonly hermit. And he's having this coughing fit, coughing up blood into the sink. He looks in the mirror and, he realizes, and he actually says right out in the open, I have more in common with a bunch of, and he uses a racial slur, than with my own family. And it's that scene in which we realize, he's not necessarily evil, but he's coming to a realization that he has more in common with people he's spent his entire life hating than he does with people he identifies with. And over the course of the film, he comes to realize that, he has spent his whole life hating people for really no good reason. And the world has changed. It's moved on without him. He no longer has a place in it. He's on his way out anyway. And so he resolves that he's going to die, defending people he has come to care about. All right. And it's a kind of film, much like Cobra Kai. If you watch that show on YouTube, I highly recommend it. It is worth the subscription fee for YouTube Premium. Where again, you've got William Zach as Johnny Lawrence, and he's actually going ahead and being challenged by these kids, Miguel, who's a Hispanic. You've got this girl who's like kind of light-skinned black or Hispanic, who's overweight. She's an outcast. She gets bullied online. And, then there's other kids who, otherwise he would, if he'd been, in his teens, he would have bullied these kids while he was in high school. But now that he's an adult, he's at the lowest point in his life, and they're coming to him, asking him to train them, and they're helping him out by bringing, money to his business. But, he's being challenged in his previous beliefs and realizing that the person he used to be really was an asshole. In fact, at the end towards the end of season 2 of Cobra Kai, he actually says, if you live by the letter of Cobra Kai's philosophy, yeah, it'll make you powerful, it'll make you badass, but it'll also make you an asshole. And, then he goes into this speech, and it's really wonderful. So, that's a kind of likable character that you want to invest in. You want that character to triumph, or if not, then at least, go out in such a way that, resonates with you and has you thinking, this person died a noble death and was not in vain. So, that's the kind of character you want in any story. And the problem with Batwoman is, and always has been, that they cast this plank of wood, Ruby Rose. I mean, she's a model and, out bisexual, fine, whatever, more power to her. But they use that as a selling point, as though that's the only reason to come and watch this show, and anything else is secondary. And then you're really kind of pushing it with the whole, girl power, lesbian stuff, pandering to a demographic that doesn't like to be pandered to. And so, the ratings kept going down and down and getting worse and worse. And a lot of it, has to do with two things. One, that the actress can't act worth a damn. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's a great as a model, but as an actress, she just sucks. I'm sorry, but, sometimes, someone just is not a good fit for a show. And when you're doing casting just to pander to a demographic and not because a person is actually right for the role, you're going to have problems. So, there were issues surrounding Ruby Rose herself, which I'll get to, and also chiefly the bad writing. The writing is garbage. People do things that make no sense, but they advance the plot, supposedly, and, so you have it in. But things have to make sense in a story, okay? You don't just have things happen just because. and you don't fill it up with endless exposition. You show, don't tell. To the extent that you do have exposition, you have a character who doesn't know what's going on and has to have things explained to him or her. A good example is John Carpenter's Vampires, where James Woods' Jack Crow has to explain the rules of hunting vampires to this priest who's been appointed to his team, which has just been wiped out, and he's the only survivor, or one of the only survivors. There's one other who lived. But, this priest is kind of new to it all, and he's basically a bookworm, a librarian. And he's not really cut out for the field at first, and so he has to have the rules of the story explained to him, like, how to kill vampires, what works against them and what doesn't. He has to have all that told to him. And so that's your exposition character. That's the character. Another example is Big Trouble in Little China, where Kurt Russell's Jack Burton is the outsider being brought into a world he doesn't understand, and so his partner and friend in all this has to explain things to him because he doesn't know, and because he doesn't know, we the audience don't know. And so when Wang explains to Jack Burton what's going on, he's also explaining it to us, the audience, and that's how you do exposition. That's the right way to do it. With what we've got now, for example, in Disney Star Wars, in STD, in Star Blek Pickard, in Batwoman and stuff, you've got exposition with very little being shown. So you feel like you're being talked down to. You're being treated as though you were dumber than the source material, and honestly, you're not. And that's one of my big complaints, is that today's writers do not respect the intelligence of their audience. The audience is actually smarter than most writers today, in my opinion, because you've got writers who've been around forever, who know the craft, front and back, sideways, up and down, down to the core, and they're getting up in years. They're either retiring or they've written their best material and that the best is behind them, or whatever, or they're dying off. But the new crop of writers is not being taught how to write a good story, and that's the problem with Batwoman. You've got a horrible story being told. It's over convoluted. None of the things make sense, but they advance the story, or so we're led to believe, and so they happen. It's inconsistent, but they also had issues with the lead actress. So let me go ahead and get back to the article here. So, this whole thing about her being likable, messy, a little goofy, untamed, that's a good thing, but stop pushing her as being a lesbian, okay? That should not be the selling point. The selling point should be, okay, this person is being flung into a life she didn't ask for, didn't expect to get, but, that's what's going on. And if they'd actually just written Ruby Rose's character to be likable, it wouldn't have been so bad. So, as far as why Ruby Rose left, of course, there's things that have come out recently in the last couple of weeks since she announced her departure that, give a little bit more insight, because there are reasons for why she left. All right, so she's broken her silence on her decision to leave the Arrowverse just weeks after announcing she would not be returning for Batwoman Season 2. Ruby shocked fans earlier this month. Of course, now it's June, so it's last month. But she confirmed that she would be stepping down from her role as Kate Kane, admitting that it was not a decision she made lightly. Now the actress has spoken out about her exit from the CW series on Instagram, telling followers that it's her choice for now to stay quiet about her reasons for leaving, but those who know. Alongside a fan-made video of some of Batwoman's smilier, or probably more ridiculous moments, Ruby thanked the cast, crew, producers, and studio behind the scenes for their work on the show. I'm sure next season will be amazing. Thank you for everyone coming on this journey. If I mentioned everyone, it would be 1,000 tags, but thank you to the cast, crew, producers, and studio. Ruby wrote, it wasn't an easy decision, but those who know. And of course, there's there's speculation as to why she left. Those range from her injury on set that almost paralyzed her. She needed emergency surgery on her spinal column because she did injure herself doing stunt work on Batwoman. And why they don't have a stunt person anyway? I mean, honestly, why are you making this woman do her own stunts? She's a model, not a fighter, okay? She's not Gina Carano, who is a former MMA fighter and is trained in doing stunt work and dangerous fight choreography. And even stunt people get injured, okay? So, people were complaining last year about Brie Larson having a stunt person on set, even though she claims to do all her own stunts. Well, no, she probably did do all her own stunts, but that stunt person is there as a legal requirement because it's part of the contract. Actors on movie sets are insured. You have to have insurance on a movie set. For the cast, the crew, for the producers, there's insurance for pretty much anything and everything that can happen, because people do get injured on sets, okay? And if you don't have that insurance there, you're going to end up losing on a lot of money. People's careers can be ended, all right? Actually, one of the crew members on Batman was, in fact, paralyzed for life, okay, because of an injury incurred on set. So, this is something that very well could have ended Ruby Rose's career permanently, because obviously she's not Christopher Reeve, who can act in pretty much any situation, and actually did star in a remake of Rear Window following the injury that left him paralyzed from the shoulders down. But Ruby Rose is not that great an actress. She's spent most of her career as a model, and so it's not like she had all that much of a career in the first place in terms of acting. So, but just that Brie Larson had a stunt person on set, that was there as an insurance policy in case there was a thing that required her to step aside at the order of the director of the movie. It's like, look, you are not doing this fucking stunt. When Henry Cavill was working with Tom Cruise on the latest Mission Impossible movie, there was a stunt that Tom Cruise actually broke both his ankles doing it, and Henry Cavill wanted to do a stunt, and Tom Cruise, who actually is a professional stuntman because he spent his career doing all his own stunts, and you have to get certification as a stunt person if you're going to do that as an actor, all right? So none of this should be surprising if you actually know and understand the business. But Cruise talked him out of it, saying, look, I've got certification because I've been doing this pretty much my entire career since I started doing all my own stunts. I can guarantee you are going to get yourself killed doing this, all right? This is why you leave it to the professionals. But, with Brie Larson, most of her stunts, really were not so physically taxing that the director and producers felt that she was any real danger, so they let her do all her own stunts. But you still have to have that stunt person on set as a legal requirement because it's all in the contracts and everything. So when Ruby Rose started doing Batwoman, the first thing that should have been done was to employ a professional stunt person because Ruby Rose does not have all that much acting experience and probably does not have that much in terms of fighting experience. So, you can't have her doing the sort of stunts that people like Tom Cruise do, or Jackie Chan, who's literally broken every bone in his body at one point or another. Not all at the same time, obviously, because that would be fatal. But he has done all his old stunts. Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, throughout their careers, these guys did a lot of their own stunts, but it also took its toll on their bodies. That's why Brendan Fraser had to retire from acting for so long, because, his knees were basically held together with tape and popsicle sticks, and also lots of pain medication. But that's, one reason why Ruby Rose probably stepped down, because, you're in constant agony from a spinal injury, and I've got those myself. I've got all the discs in my neck are herniated, but the two worst are in C6 and C7, where they go the nerve clusters branch out into my shoulders and arms, and when one or both of those gets pinched, there's no way that I can move without radiating pain going down there, and it's a level of pain that. If you've never experienced it before, I hope you never do, because it is sheer agony. So, this is very real stuff, and the reason why you don't want to go ahead and do your own stunts, especially if you're not used to doing it. So that's probably one thing that contributed to Ruby Rose not sticking around. Although other reasons were her attitude on set. She was described as having a bad attitude, like, acting like a little princess on there, like, yeah, I'm the lead and whatever. But, I'm sure part of it was because of the agony she was experiencing while she recovered from surgery, and that's probably going to affect her attitude as well. So there was probably that, and of course Hollywood is ripe with actors who are very difficult to work with. Christian Bale, James Woods, as I've mentioned already, notoriously difficult actors to work with. Marlon Brando was famously difficult to work with, because he just had such a demanding presence on there, because someone on that level of acting, he had the chops to go ahead and act the way he did on set. But Hollywood does have difficult actors, and when you're a difficult actor who's also dealing with extreme pain and other issues, because apparently Ruby Rose has struggled with emotional health. She's apparently attempted suicide at least once, so, stemming from trauma that she experienced in her life. So, it's not like she doesn't have a reason to be difficult, although not necessarily to say that she has a right to be difficult, but you at least should understand why she might be. So don't think that just because she wasn't all that great to be around on set that there was no reason for it, or that you shouldn't at least try to empathize with some of the things she must have been going through, especially in the lead up to her surgery and in the aftermath, because obviously that would affect your demeanor. And plus, you're also being thrust into this role where you're basically constantly being made to live up to some kind of like hype machine, because the producers behind Batwoman are really using this as a vehicle to push their sexuality onto their audience as a selling point, and not as an aspect that just this person is our hero and just happens to be lesbian or bisexual or whatever. That shouldn't be the main focus, but they're using her as a selling point because of her sexuality. And even when they announced that she would be replaced, they were very quick to point out that we're looking for another LGBT actress to play the part. It's like, well, you can be a non-LGBT person and play an LGBT person. Okay, does no one think that Neil Patrick Harris is capable of playing someone other than a gay person? Because he's gay in real life. He's married to a guy. He's got his own family, and he's happy in his life. But he's played womanizers on television. He's played straight guys. You want to know why? Because he's an actor. And just because you happen to be gay in your real life, and George Takei on Star Trek, it was an open secret for decades that he was gay before he officially came out. But, they've played straight characters, and that's because they're actors, and you don't necessarily have to play someone who is a version of yourself when you get up on the stage or in front of a camera. That's why it's called acting. You're pretending to be someone you're not and getting paid for it. Or hope you get paid for it. I don't know. You might be doing community theater. But the point is, you're playing someone you aren't necessarily. I mean, would it help if you're, for example, a method actor to have something within your own life and experiences that can add to your performance for a particular role? Yeah, but it's not absolutely necessary. And so, for CW, it seems like they have not learned any lessons, except that, okay, we are acknowledging that we fucked up and that we should have chosen someone who can actually act and had a character who's actually fleshed out and likable instead of having this plank of wood who can't emote and who we're just using to push a particular demographic that we're pandering to. So, yeah, but let me go ahead and get back to the article here, because I am running a little bit short and my lights are probably going to run out of battery juice in a little bit, so I want to get through this. Alright, so despite Ruby Sutton exit Batwoman's second season is still planned to go ahead. In a statement, Berlanti Productions and WB-TV reassured viewers that they remain committed to this series and its long-time future. It's probably not going to have much of a future because of coronavirus and because you're not replacing any of your writers. So, yeah, and then of course we've got why she left the CW series, and this is from Variety.com from May 20th. And according to multiple sources, Ruby Rose was unhappy with the long hours required of her as a series lead, which led to friction on set. So, and that I think is kind of a cop-out. I mean, any actor who's a lead in a show is going to put in long hours because more is, yes, going to be required of you. And so, yeah, you have to tailor your life to your work because, I mean, come on, you think I enjoy going to work at a restaurant for like 10, 11 hours for a shift and coming home bone tired? No. But if I want to get paid and pay the bills, keep a roof over my head, obviously I gotta just buckle down and do the job, all right? So, come on. That's a cop-out, and it's obviously not the reason why she was let go. I mean, yes, she was difficult to work with on set, which I've just explained, some of the reasons why she might have been, but no, she wasn't let go because she was unhappy with the long hours, all right? So, don't believe that for a minute. But there are other issues. So, speculation has been rampant as to the reason for Rose's exit from the series. It was speculated that it had something to do with the pain associated with an emergency surgery Rose underwent for 2 herniated discs, but a source familiar with the situation tells Variety that Rose's decision had nothing to do with her health or injury. Rose has also been open about her mental health issues in the past. Back in October, she posted on Instagram, "I've struggled with mental health my entire life." She went on to say that she had attempted suicide multiple times and had been hospitalized at different times in her life. In a statement issued announcing Rose's departure, the studio network and Berlanti Productions said they would be seeking a new lead actress and member of the LGBT community in the coming months. So, yeah, obviously, when you've got a situation in which your job really... See, Greg Berlanti is an asshole, okay? He's one of these assholes who likes to use his sexuality as a selling point because he has nothing else going for him. Because obviously he's not good at what he does. As a writer, as a creative, as a storyteller, he's garbage. Because look how awful Batwoman Season 1 is, and you're announcing Season 2 before Season 1 is even really finished airing its first couple of episodes. when you've got no guarantee that it won't be canceled by the end of season 1 for low ratings. And the only reason they're keeping it going at this point is because they don't want to admit failure for this agenda pushing. And it's not necessarily agenda pushing for LGBT, SJW type of stuff. I don't like to criticize for that, because a lot of the reactions accusing people of being social justice warriors are kind of based on bullshit, in the sense that they're rebelling against something that really isn't what they think it is. But the whole social justice crap that is being foisted on us is not even legitimate. Okay? Because look at shows like the original Star Trek. Look at the Orville. Look at Cobra Kai. These are all shows that fans love, that actually have very diverse casts, that all have, the Orville, for example, has a gay couple with a kid, and they're portrayed by black actors. And that's actually probably, Bortus and Clyden are probably one of my favorite aspects of the Orville, because they're portrayed realistically, okay? Because, married couples, whether they're gay or straight or whatever, real married couples have problems. Real married couples have issues where, like, one is at work all the time and kind of neglecting the spouse who stays at home with the kids. Situations in which, very similar to my parents. My mother, unfortunately, is a raging bigot, Islamophobic, racist, homophobic. She's a pretend Christian, which means she pretends to be a Christian in order to act like she's better than everyone else. Very much a fan of Pat Robertson and Joel Osteen and all those charlatans who rip people off under the pretense of religion. But she is very bigoted. But my dad stayed married to her for 41 years because, I think on some level he loved her, but, by the time he died, unfortunately, things had deteriorated to the point where, that just was not possible to stay with her. And I'll go into that another time. But, real marriages have stuff like that where, and, sometimes those marriages don't work. People stay together because they don't necessarily like each other, but they want to stay together for the kids or for their careers, or because maybe you got married because you want someone to be able to take care of you in your old age or infirmity. Because my dad was bedridden and confined to a wheelchair for the last 20 or so last 14 years of his life or so, because of spinal injuries that he had, the surgeries had been screwed up and left him unable to walk. So, there's all sorts of reasons why a marriage would be miserable. And, so the point I'm making is that, watching the problems that Bortus and Clyden have on the Orville, it comes off as being realistic. All right. And because it's realistic, you can find reasons to sympathize with Bortus and to understand, what he goes through and some of the mistakes he makes in his own marriage. Because, he does, put his job ahead of everything else in his life. He neglects his spouse. He got addicted to porn through a holographic program. So I mean, there's like cigarette. Both Bortus and Clyden get hooked on cigarettes because apparently they're hypersensitive to getting addicted to nicotine. So they end up having this hilarious moment where they're waiting for a medication to get them unaddicted, and then they end up with fighting over the last cigarette, and it's just hilarious. But the whole reason you identify with these two is because they do come across as believable and well written, and you can kind of place yourself into one or both of their shoes because they're they're written that well. So it's not like shows like the Orville and Cobra Kai aren't diverse. They are. And it's not like they don't push a leftist political agenda, because they kind of do. Even Cobra Kai, which, you might not think is political, but there is an ideology that you were being asked to really seriously evaluate and condemn, which is the ideology that Kreese has. Because Kreese is very much that type of soldier whose body left the battlefield, but his brain really didn't. And so it affected his entire outlook on life, to the point where he did become a manipulative, violent scumbag who, is just an asshole. But you see in season 2 of Cobra Kai, some of the reasons why he is the way he is. And you still do not agree with that. And Johnny Lawrence actually ends up finding himself at odds with his former sensei, because he has been trying to redeem Cobra Kai and make it into something that it never was when he was a member, or when he was just a student. And when Cobra Kai wins that championship at the end of season 1, he takes no joy in it, because, the price that he paid to get that trophy was just too high. And so, there's this worldview where Johnny realizes that, maybe, Daniel LaRusso's teacher was right, and maybe he would have been better off, under Mr. Miyagi. In fact, I actually always kind of wondered, after Karate Kid Part 3, what would have happened if Johnny Lawrence, dejected and adrift, came to Mr. Miyagi under some kind of circumstance and ended up becoming a pupil of his. And, I think that would be kind of interesting to see Johnny Lawrence maybe trying to reconcile with Daniel. They don't necessarily have to be friends, but maybe they reach an understanding. Maybe, Johnny ends up having to fight Kreese for control of the dojo one more time, and, just maybe he's kind of doomed to have that struggle. But, I think it's one of those potential stories that, Johnny finds himself caught between these two opposing ideologies, Kreese's ideology that he kind of grew up under, and then, Mr. Miyagi's ideology, which was, much more devoted to the true principles of karate, of it being self-defense, not, heavy emphasis on defense. And so, that is a way where you take a political or social issue and present it in a way that doesn't talk down to the audience. And so what Greg Berlanti is doing with Batwoman is just the opposite of all that, because he knows he's a shit writer and a shit storyteller, and so all he has is a selling point. Well, we're going to pander to LGBT people and use the sexuality of Kane as the selling point for our show, because otherwise nobody will want to watch it. But, the article regarding replacing Ruby Rose and actually replacing the Kane character, that, if you really pay attention and read between the lines, that's really a tacit admission by Berlanti that he knows how deficient his show is and why it's so deficient, because the whole Kate Kane story arc was so messed up and so badly done that it can't continue. Because, they could have recast the character and said, okay, because look what happened with Bewitched, and you had Dick York replaced by Dick Sargent, but playing the same character as before, which was Samantha's husband. So it's not like you couldn't have gone ahead and just kept the Kate Kane character. They could have. And just had a different actress play her. And, and maybe, you could have her have a scene in which her face gets messed up and she has to go through surgery or something. I don't know. But, if this were Doctor Who, you could simply come up with the story arc of regeneration, or the story point of regeneration, where you explain the departure of the actor by replacing with a different actor playing the same character, and because it's an alien, that's how you explain it. That was brilliant, and I still am impressed by the level of sheer balls of brass it took to pull that off back in the 1960s. But you could very well have some kind of thing written into the first couple of episodes of season 2, where Kane suffers an injury that disfigures her and forces a reconstructive surgery. You could have done that, but they chose to not even bother recasting for the same character. They chose to replace Kane altogether. And why do you think that is? It's because Berlanti is admitting that he fucked up the whole Kane story arc so badly and miscast it so badly that there just is no continuing it if you want to salvage the show. And so now I think season 2, if they want to have a season 3, CW is probably mandating, look, you need to hire someone who, 1, can act, 2, you have to have material that will be better, because you're not pulling in the ratings, and I don't give a shit what kind of agenda you want to push. In Hollywood, if you're not pulling in the money, they're not going to keep you around. And all the backstage politics are not going to solve the problems and keep you from getting fired, because Hollywood is all about the money. And that's its chief priority. And I pretty much guarantee you that if Hollywood thought that there was money to be made in being homophobic and racist, it would go back to being openly homophobic and racist, as opposed to covertly like it's been for the past 20 or 30 years. So, and if you don't believe me, I mean, look at how Hollywood and British television portray gay people on shows like Doctor Who, and in American television, where the people who are insane are also gay. It's like, well, why are you making the gay character crazy? And like, as though being, I mean, especially with Stephen Moffat, okay, and on Sherlock, if you really think about it, Moriarty is dismissed by Stephen Moffat as being like this posh, boring villain. He really wasn't, but it's, he's trying to justify, what he's done to Moriarty for his show, and turns him into a raging psycho and also a screaming queen who gay baits Sherlock Holmes, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, or I'm sorry, Cumberbatch, yeah, who also can't act, by the way, but that there's this habit among members of Britain's version of Hollywood of writing gay characters who are also evil and insane. And it's like, well, what does that really say about your so-called wokeness when your gay characters are insane and evil? It's like the old movies of the 40s and 50s and beyond that, where your villains were all non-white, like Asiatic or black or Native American or whatever, and the good guys were usually white. And even the non-white good guys were portrayed by white actors, like, say, Charlie Chan or whomever. But that's, yeah. I mean, Hollywood has always been infamously racist and homophobic, and it's been this decades-long struggle to try and change that. And there's still a lot of room for growth, because if you think about STD, for example, the bad guys like Philippa Georgiou's Evil Mirror Universe counterpart, Stamets and what's his name's evil universe counterparts were all portrayed as being bi or pansexual. And it's hinted that, this is an aspect of them being evil, whereas in the STD universe, you're still kind of portrayed as being kind of a dick. So, that's, yeah, for all the pretend wokeness, the fake wokeness that's out there, it's really not. Because if it were really woke, like the Orville truly is, and I'm actually going to be doing a video essay on how the Orville is actually woke and how Cobra Kai is actually woke, while shows like STD and Doctor Who are not in the future. Depends on my hours, because I go back to the office next week, and that's going to have me working 6 days a week again. So we'll see how that affects my schedule. But that's pretty much the thing that's going on in Hollywood right now. And so there's this tendency now to place the pandering to the demographic above all else, because you don't really have anything else to sell, because you're a no-talent hack like Jar Jar Abrams or Ruin Johnson or Greg Berlanti, and everything you produce is shit. So you've got to pick a selling point that you think is going to be a hit with a certain target demographic. And what corporate boardrooms are looking at right now, especially with regards to Hollywood, they do read spreadsheets. That's part of your job as a corporate asshole, is to read spreadsheets and do surveys and look at census statistics. And they're looking at all that information and realizing that audiences are becoming younger, more diverse, much more out about their sexuality than previous generations. I mean, even my own generation, I'm Gen X, okay? And I've got relatives and friends who had to stay in the closet for much of their lives because their parents would have disowned them. And my own dad actually was closeted his whole life. Because he couldn't come out to his wife, obviously, because she would have killed him probably. And his parents probably would have killed him, or at the very least disowned him and not had anything to do with him again. So, that's just a fact of reality. So, but, younger generations, Zoomers and Millennials especially, they're less inclined to tolerate that bullshit that says, oh yeah, you have to hide who you really are, and cater to weak ass little bitch boys who are insecure in their own masculinity and offended by any attempt to have a person say, look, I'm proud to be black, or I'm proud to be gay or bisexual or pansexual or whatever. There still is, even in my generation, which was kind of like this transition between the boomers and everyone else, that there's this tendency to act as though one person's assertion of himself or herself somehow threatens my assertion of myself. Well, not necessarily. And my approach, and maybe because I tend to find myself caught in between different conservative factions, like the ones who don't pretend to be anything other than conservatives and the ones who pretend to be liberal. There's this thinking that, because you're expressing yourself in a way that is out there, that somehow is an attack on mine. Well, not necessarily, but you get shows like the Orville who can present a gay couple like Borges and Clyde in such a way that actually is not offensive, because it's just treated as a fact of reality and portrayed realistically by very talented actors who obviously have great chemistry with one another in terms of playing off these diametrically opposed personalities. Because Clyden is very much a traditional, very conservative member of his society, and possibly because of both because of the culture in which he was raised and because of finding out that he wasn't who he thought he was previously, caused him to double down on the culture he was raised in. And so he's very closed-minded, very conservative, and very hostile to anyone who's different from he is. And that comes into conflict with Bortus, who is, much more cosmopolitan. He's a member of the Planetary Union, serving on a Planetary Union ship. And, he's very devoted to the ideals of the Planetary Union, or, which is Seth MacFarlane's version of the Federation. But, he's, he gets much more exposure to other cultures and comes to realize that, even if he doesn't agree with those other cultures and, aspects thereof, but he at least has to learn to tolerate them and learn to work with people from different cultures and different backgrounds and different ideologies, just because you have to in order to be a functioning member of the crew. Because if you can't, then you're more of a liability. And so, this brings Bortus into a frame of mind where, he's kind of become more open-minded in the sense that, he's much less hostile than his spouse is to other cultures and other races. So that's all that's played very well by very talented actors, and so Ruby Rose, like I said, she cannot act. I'm sorry, but she can't act. Henry Cavill can't act. That's why he was a poor fit for Superman. There are some people, like Arnold Schwarzenegger too. Schwarzenegger really can't act much. I mean, he's got, very obvious limitations as an actor, and he's good when he stays within those limitations, but when he tries to step outside, that's when, he really has problems. That's why, some of the more lighthearted fare that he does is always so hit and miss, because he just doesn't have the range necessary to kind of pull it off. So, so I think Ruby Rose, in terms of being a diversity hire, she was always the wrong choice, because, if you're going to hire an actor to play someone who is meant to be written a certain way, that actor still has to emote. That actor still has to be able to invoke sympathy in the audience. And if you come across as having no real personality like Ruby Rose does, and if you can't even be bothered to do that kind of job and put in the kind of hours that it takes to really get good at your craft, then, I'm sorry, but you don't deserve to stay on the job. So, that there's, I think probably what's going on with the recasting and writing up a new character is really kind of Greg Berlanti's admission, whether he likes it or not, that yes, season 1 of Batwoman is a miserable failure, and he does need to course correct before the show gets canceled, because right now, with Hollywood shutting down, just now trying to figure out how best to reopen in the fall, so that because otherwise we're going to be watching a lot of reruns going into the next 12 months or so. So obviously things have to be retailored around that, and that's going to cause delays. And again, that's probably why you've got this so-called Snyder version of Justice League being released next year, because Warner Brothers really doesn't have all that much in the can right now to last more than a year. And Fox is probably going to have to pull New Mutants out and find a way to release that at some point, because right now there's just no way that you can produce anything new right now until you come up with a system that can help mitigate the spread of the virus. And obviously we're going to see a huge spike in infection rates, because it's too soon to come out of quarantine. That's just a fact. I mean, 108,000, 110,000 people dead over the span of 2 months since all this started. And you multiply that by another 10 months, you figure there's like 12 months in a year. So yeah, you multiply that 100,000 dead times 6 for a year's worth of cases, like actual deaths. That's a lot of people. All right. So, don't tell me that, this is no big deal. It is a big deal. It's not overblown, and it is, a lot more lethal than a lot of people are letting themselves believe, because they want to believe everything's some kind of conspiracy to keep white people down, or whatever nonsense they want to tell themselves. But that's pretty much what's going on. So if Greg Berlanti wants to keep the show alive, this is his admission that they need to do better, because quarantine aside, even with the necessity to keep new content going, because otherwise, what else are you going to do while everything's shut down, besides put out reruns, and you can't do that forever. So you're going to have to go back to production at some point, but when you finally do, you're going to need something that people are going to want to come back to. And I just feel that Ruby Rose being separated from Batwoman, was basically the way of saying, look, we have to save the show above all else. Otherwise, this little experiment of ours in pandering to a target demographic is going to be a failure, and we don't want to admit failure. So, yeah, Ruby Rose, most expendable member of the cast, and and obviously she didn't like the situation she was thrust into, but because you can't tell me that there's no factoring in her injury. Okay, like I said, they've already had one crew member actually paralyzed. Ruby Rose was almost paralyzed. If her injury had gotten worse on set, yeah, she could very well right now be in a wheelchair, and she's very lucky not to be. So I'm sure that had something at least to do with it. But also the strain of being put under the spotlight the way she has been, and being turned into like this PR stunt, for lack of a better term, is really, it's something that's going to put a lot of stress on anyone. Especially if you're the lead actress, you've got all sorts of pressure on you to be perceived as doing well and having no issues. And unfortunately, that's not something that she was able to do and maintain her health. A lot of Doctor Who fans are still upset with Christopher Eccleston for never returning to Doctor Who or even attend fan conventions. But, the fact of the matter is that at the time he played the Ninth Doctor, he himself was going through, some issues himself. He was suffering from, I think it was either anorexia or bulimia, one of the two. He had an eating disorder, which is why he was so thin. But, he had his own emotional health issues to deal with. And, for him, to ask him to go back to that and to revisit something that reminds him of a place in his life that, he's trying to get over and move on from, so he can be in a better, healthier mindset. I think that's a bit unfair towards him. But, he left Doctor Who for much the same reason, along with, in addition to the way he didn't like the way that the crew were and cast were kind of treating some of the crew members, and this kind of clash of, because Eccleston really is one of those actors who I think sides with the your average crew member, the gaffer, and oh yeah, there goes my one light. So I'm gonna have to turn my stream off pretty shortly, but yeah, this is just my opinion that Ruby Rose needed to get away from this for her own health, emotional health, and also Berlanti's basically trying to save the sinking ship at this point by not only recasting Ruby Rose, but doing away with the Kate Kane character, because obviously no one's really liking that arc because of the poor way that it's been executed. So anyway, that's my opinion. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you. Until next time, this is Michael Wilk for the Wilk Report saying take care, good night, I'm out.